All right, hi everyone, and welcome to webinar 7, Minimizing Tillage of the Soil Health Training Program webinar series. Today is Tuesday, January 30th. As always, we want to thank our funders like Champlain Basin Program and NUEPIC for this opportunity. Similar agenda as usual, we're going to do a course overview, a homework review, and then we'll have Abby and Jeff present on minimizing tillage, and then we'll talk about the next class. As a little bit of a reminder, we are here on January 30th. Holy cow, we did it. We made it through a full month, 2024. And we are in the middle of how do we manage for soil health. Next week, we will be talking about agroforestry with some folks from Interlace Commons. Quick homework review. Hopefully folks had a chance to read chapter 16, Minimizing Tillage. There are some really great images and references in that chapter, so I do hope folks are able to use that as a reference moving forward. And with that, I'm going to introduce our presenters today. We have Abby and Jeff, and so Abby is an agronomy outreach specialist with UVM Extension. She leads a portfolio of agronomy outreach and technical assistance work in the Champlain Valley, focusing on water quality, soil health, nutrient management, and agronomy. And Jeff Sanders has been working for UVM Extension on Dr. Heather Darby's Northwest Crops and Soils team for almost 12 years. Previously, he was a manager on a large dairy farm in northern Vermont. His work has focused on conservation field practices and BMPs to improve water quality and help mitigate climate change on farm fields. He's also a TSP for NMP development. His expertise is in no-till systems and cover cropping. He also tries to stay current on technology used in the field and precision ag equipment, and he has helped farmers plant thousands of acres of no-till crops as well as cover crops using many different scenarios. So we've got some great experts here today with us. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Abby, and we'll get things going.
My screen showing up all right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect. So we do have a full agenda for y'all today. We will begin by talking about tillage. Why do we till to begin with? Then dive into reduced tillage and the soil health benefits, as well as some other co-benefits of the practice. Then give an overview of reduced and no-till systems. And then from there, really take it to, the applied practical applications of reduced and no-till systems, and then wrap up with some final considerations for technical service providers. We will break for questions throughout the session today, so feel free to drop questions in the chat as you have them, or wait until we pause if you want to unmute yourself and share them at that time. So to get us started, what is tillage? So tillage refers to the preparation of soil for agricultural purposes and involves the mechanical disturbance of the soil. So tillage is a very valuable tool in, our agricultural toolbox. We often think of primary tillage as that first pass through the field that opens and loosens the soil. It's really an important pass for incorporating organic materials. If you have manure or fertilizer, other soil amendments, or crop residue, or are interested in green manure, this is really the pass that will incorporate those materials. From an equipment perspective, this is typically a plow, chisel, or heavy disc. And then it's normally followed by a secondary tillage pass that really is preparing the seed bed, killing any weeds, pulverizing the soil so that we get, a prepared seed bed and good seed to soil contact. And this is normally done with finishing discs, harrows, field cultivators, and roller packers. So as I mentioned, tillage is, a very valuable tool in the toolbox, really beneficial for incorporating manure or plant materials, which is not only important from a water quality perspective to get them under the ground, but also for, crop growth and nutrient cycling. Tillage is really important for weed and insect control. So especially in our organic systems where we don't have herbicides to help control, weed pressures, those systems tend to rely on tillage for the job. Seedbed preparation is crucial, as I mentioned. So it's really important that we get that good seed to soil contact, and having a prepared bed really helps control for those things. Addressing compaction with tillage. Tillage is a short-term strategy to try to alleviate some surface compaction or subsurface compaction with subsoilers. And then, spring passes are really valuable to get for nutrient availability and moisture management. So when we till in the spring, we're really jumpstarting that mineralization of organic matter, incorporating any green crop residues on the surface that could easily be good food sources, as well as help support drying out the soil so that we get it the right moisture conditions that are conducive for planting. So there's a whole slew of reasons of why tillage exists and is in the toolbox. But we also know that tillage comes with risks, mainly the destruction of organic matter, erosion, loss of soil biology, and then, some water quality and economic risks associated with those things. So we know it's definitely something of interest to move towards reducing tillage when we can. This is a diagram from the Building Better Soils textbook that I think really highlights the danger of, intensive tillage, where we are setting ourselves up for higher soil erosion. And with that, we do end up in this downward spiral where we have less aggregate stability, we have less organic matter. As our soils, are degraded and become less healthy, they require more inputs, more mechanical disruption, to help alleviate those concerns. So we do end up with this, negative feedback cycle and this downward spiral. And we see this on the landscape, right? So on the left, we're looking at a gully in the Champlain Valley. And on the right is a photo in the Connecticut River Valley following Irene. And both really show the soil health and water quality consequences of soil erosion. So, right, this not only has downstream negative impacts when that soil ends up in a water body, and, that sediment comes with particulate phosphorus that we're, really concerned about in Lake Champlain. But there's also, relevant in-field soil health concerns. So the topsoil has, most of our nutrients and soil biology that are really crucial for agronomic production. And when we see that soil move off the field, that is definitely a hurt that we incur when we consider crop growth and production. And I think this photo demonstrates, why do we plant no-till nicely. So, this is two photos taken in the same field. On the left half, that was a field that had conventional tillage without cover, and on the right is, a no-till cover crop field. And if we look at that left-hand photo, there are a few things that pop out to me. So one, we can see that water was moving across the landscape, moving soil with that. We also see surface sealing. So that's when the aggregates at the soil surface break apart and those particles settle, essentially creating a seal and closing up pore space, which is going to create challenges for infiltration as well as drainage. You can even see, some algae and, other evidence of ponding and saturated conditions, which are going to be, really, really challenging or it's going to be a hindrance to crop growth and soil biology as well. And then if we compare it to the right, we don't see that as much evidence of those really wet, saturated conditions. I think this is Kirsten in the photo, and her boots are dry on the right, whereas you see her tracking a lot of mud on the left. And another big difference here is just looking at the corn crop itself. So I'm looking at a vibrant green crop on the right, whereas on the left, that clearly has been struggling at either nutrients have been moving out of the system, or those roots are just in such saturated conditions that they can't effectively take up the nutrients it needs. So, there is a lot of evidence to move towards these no-till systems. And one of the big themes is the relationship between tillage and organic matter. So, we've learned that organic matter is crucial for healthy soil functioning across physical, chemical, and biological components. And tillage really influences organic matter in a couple of mechanisms. So first is through the disturbance to the soil itself. And when we till the soil, we're aerating the soil, exposing more soil to the air. That causes oxidation of carbon and, loss of carbon via CO2. And then we also have more rapid mineralization of organic matter. So when we till the soil, we're warming it up, exposing it to oxygen. And as a result, we'll see more mineralization of organic matter from that tillage pass. And the other is through, surface residue. If we're able to maintain and build surface residue, we are going to be returning carbon to these systems, which will support sustaining organic matter as well. So this graph here on the right is just showing that relationship between tillage intensity and organic matter, where, the plow here is the most intensive tillage. And as we move to the right to our no-till systems, we see a higher percentage of organic matter. I want to hone in on, residue and surface cover a little bit more. Surface cover is really important to help minimize soil losses through erosion. This excerpt, or the graph on the right here, is from the Building Better Soils textbook. And what we're looking at here is the role of, as well as crop, in terms of how much residue is left on the soil surface, and in turn, how much soil loss we can expect to is at risk of being lost from that system. So here the green circles are corn, and though they don't say corn grain, it is a corn grain system, right? We know that those corn grain systems leave a lot of residue on the surface, thus providing a lot of protection. And without circles are the soybean cropping system. And what I want to highlight here, though we do have, increasing amount of acres in Vermont going into corn, grain, and soybean, we have a lot of corn that's being harvested for corn silage, right? So when we harvest the whole corn silage plant, even in a no-till system, we are leaving a lot of that soil exposed. And though with a no-till system, we are certainly reducing risk of soil erosion, since we're not, disrupting the soil aggregates and leaving them susceptible to being moved off the field, we really reduce risk when we stack practices and have soil protection via a cover crop or other perennial growth. So I really appreciated the presentation last week on, opportunities to integrate cover cropping into our cropping systems. And I think for the case of corn silage, there's a lot of benefit of stacking, reduced tillage with cover cropping in our systems to really provide that residue cover that we're looking for. And just building on this a little bit more, when we have bare soil and the force of the raindrop, it brings a lot of force, thus bursting or breaking open the soil aggregates on the soil surface. And this can create, the surface sealing that I was talking about earlier, which not only can increase the runoff potential from that field, but also minimize, how soil infiltrates into the soil profile and how it drains through the soil profile. So here we're looking at a graph with soil cover on the x-axis and percentage of precipitation on the y-axis. And when we don't have any soil cover, we're looking at just over 40% of that precipitation is susceptible to runoff. Less than 60% is actually infiltrated. So there's a lot of benefit of providing that residue on the soil surface, whether it's residue, mulch, cover crop, to not only slow down the raindrop impact and give that rain time to infiltrate into the soil profile, but also to, improve the rate of infiltration, decrease surface sealing, and potential for soil crusting as well. And then beneath the surface, by reducing tillage, we're really supporting healthy soil structure and good soil aggregation. And these will be really important for infiltration, drainage, and resiliency to compaction. On the left of this diagram here, we're looking at a soil profile under intensive tillage management compared to the long-term no-till on the right. And, on the left, not only do we see this plow pan from years and years and a long history of moldboard plowing that have created this restrictive layer that really impedes root growth, compared to on the right under long-term no-till conditions where we're really supporting a healthy soil ecosystem. We have more soil biology. We have these network of biopores that roots can get into and explore to deeper depths. That network of biopores will also be really important for drainage and infiltration. We have well aggregated soil in the topsoil, and really just sustain soil biology that will continue to support a healthy soil ecosystem. So just bringing it all together, this is some very recent data from Heather Darby's team, where they took soil health samples from farms in Franklin County and averaged them across cropping systems. So we have grass in this first row, no-till corn in the second row, and then continuous corn in the last row. And we're looking at various different soil health indicators that hopefully look a little bit familiar after Lindsay's great talk on the soil health indicators. But we see that for most, if not all of the indicators, the no-till corn had metrics that were very similar to the grass field, if not higher. So, very high aggregate stability, organic matter, respiration, which is indicative of the microbial activity. Our active carbon pool is larger than the grass or the continuous corn system. So that's really demonstrating that we have really good carbon cycling in the soil. And then overall carbon stocks. So I think, these data just really put it all together and highlight the soil health benefits that we can really gain under long-term no-till management if done effectively. So just wrapping it all up. So in the realm of soil health, we have many benefits of reduced tillage, increasing organic matter, reducing soil erosion and increasing infiltration, improved soil aggregation and soil structure, and then supporting soil biology. But we also have these, secondary benefits from reducing tillage. So in the water quality realm, right, by reducing soil erosion, we're reducing sediment loading into our water bodies as well as nutrient runoff. We also have climate benefits. So we are increasing soil carbon, decreasing, those CO2 emissions when we till, and also decreasing emissions from the tillage passes themselves. And then the economic benefit. So with fewer tillage passes, we have less wear and tear on equipment, lower fuel costs, lower inputs, decrease labor and time, which definitely can add up to be, really important for quality of life as well. So with that, I will pause for questions.
Thanks, Abby. Folks, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat or come off mute. I can start with one question. I guess I'm just thinking a lot about tillage and sorry, tillage and slope, and thinking about the relationship between those things. I don't know if you'll get into that later. Didn't know if you wanted to comment a little bit on your and how that can really impact what happens on the field.
I think we might get to it in the applied section. If not, we can definitely tackle it at that time.
Perfect. Sounds like we got a quiet group today, so not any other questions at the moment.
We
If you
will
want to
keep on going.
Perfect.
So, it's Jeff Sanders. Thank you, Abby, for that background about why we would want to consider reduced or no-till. And this, we're talking mostly about Vermont because we have a lot of unique geographical, geomorphical, ecological environments that we work in. So if we talk about our soils, so when you're out with a producer, there's a variety of different reasons why they may want to adopt or adapt a reduced tillage system. The soils may be one of them. We may be concerned from our point of view about the erosion. They may be concerned about having to pick stones, and so they would want to move to a no-till system so they don't have to deal with the rocks that are on their land. And then our growing season is unique in that it's fairly short and getting to be very wet. So we've done some research and can show that Franklin County in particular, I think, is the 50th largest corn silage growing county in the country. And it also has like one of the coldest temperatures and wettest growing season. So we have some unique challenges to Vermont, northern Vermont, and no-till is one way that we can address that by creating a more resilient system. So crops and cropping rotation, very unique in Vermont. The rest of the country would like to be able to rotate forages into their systems because we have cows that eat forage. We basically have a no-till system for that part of the rotation that we're in grass. And so now we're working on getting the other portion of the rotation into no-till as well with corn. And then the other thing that we have that's unique to Vermont is we have a lot of cow manure. And so that adds a lot of goodness to the soil when it's used properly. And obviously we know it can be a detriment if it's used improperly. But manure is something that every farmer that farms livestock has to have a plan for. Like there's a nutrient management plan, but there's also just like the logistics of handling manure. So and because of all these things, it's on a continuum. Not one size is going to fit all. People will take different parts and pieces of the stuff we're going to talk about today and try to make things work. And really what we're trying to do is help folks consider things when they're talking to the producer. And the last thing that we do in Vermont is and we'll probably end up doing more of it as issues arise, is strategic tillage. It's okay to till your field when needed. A flood comes through and wrecks your cornfield that's been no-till for many years, you're going to have to go out and fix that field. And we actually have a presentation coming up at the no-till conference at the end of February, where a speaker who's done a bunch of work with this is gonna talk. But so these are some of the reasons why we need to no-till and some of the things we need to think about when we're no-tilling. Go ahead, Abby, forward the slide. So a practical definition of no-till, it's really not complicated. It's the first step is we're going to cut a trench to a desired height. Depth, I should say. And for corn, that's about 2 inches. And for soybeans, it's 1 inch. And for grass seed, it may only be 1/4 of an inch deep, but so we're just trying to get the seed into the ground. And then we're going to place the seed placement. Simple enough. There's different equipment that we use to do this, corn planters and drills and such. And then step 3 is we just need to get good soil to seed contact. So we're going to firm the seed at the bottom of that trench. And then the 4th step is we've got to cover the seed up. You can't have the seed exposed to the air at large. So we need to close the trench, and that's no-till. I know we make a lot of it, but essentially that's what it is. And the trick of it is getting it right 99% of the time under all the different conditions. You need to build a resilient system, but to make that happen. But that when we say no-till, that's what we're talking about. You can continue on. So a conservation tillage system, Abby put this slide together. This is all the things that we would consider in a system, laid out very nicely on the screen. So equipment, rotation, things that we mostly are thinking about: cover crops, nutrient management, and so on. So I like this slide because it's really neat. And now we're going to get into some stuff that I've been working on that isn't nearly as neat, because I don't think the system is as clean cut as this slide. Go ahead, Abby. So in no-till for corn anyway, you can do it right or you can do it wrong. The slide on the left is no-till, a very vibrant, healthy looking field, and the slide on the right is also no-till, but it's got a bunch of issues associated with it. And really, it's not any particular thing that is at fault. It's how you approach the system. So like in NRCS world, no-till is a practice. They'll call it a practice, but it's much more than that. And if we approach it as a practice, it's going to fail. So what I want to talk about for the next little while is how to approach no-till as a system. So like to many people, beginners, and I was there myself, even though I'd farmed for many years, that you may think that it's just the corn planter. You just put on some heavy duty disc openers, add some stuff, and away you go. But and if you do these things, you'll be able to go plant no-till. And so for most people, they think this is a no-till system. Go ahead, Abby. And then as you get a little bit further along, you go, oh, we got to have cover crops in the system because they make the system work better. So we'll put cover crops in, and then we'll learn about and deal with all the things associated with cover cropping, and it still doesn't work all the time. Go ahead, Abby. So really what we're talking about is much more complex system. And so when I work with farmers, and you folks will be working with farmers, there's a whole bunch of different things that come together. There's psychology, there's the soil, which is made up by the physical, chemical, and biological aspects of the soil that need to be addressed. There's the agronomic aspects, the financial aspects, the mechanical / equipment, and then there's the cultural aspect. So this is more like what a no-till system really is on the ground. When you're working with people, you have to make these considerations. So I'm just going to work through a few of these to give you an idea about what, when you're with a producer, you may want to be thinking about and looking out for. So we'll just go on. So this is the most important. This is the foundation, the psychology of the farmer. That's the first most important thing. None of the rest really matters that much if the farmer doesn't have buy-in. So when I talk to farmers about it, what's their motivation to do? Is it just a cost share payment? Because that doesn't make any sense, because you can lose a lot more money doing it wrong than you could ever make over a cost share payment. You talk about expectations. How much risk or yield loss are you willing to take to make the change? And are you in it to win it? Or are you just dabbling around to see if it works? When we used to go out on farms and do these trials, and people would give us their worst fields to do it on because they didn't want their neighbors to see, or for whatever reason, they didn't have buy-in, and we do it and it wouldn't work that well. Well, we stopped doing that after 1 year because we aren't interested in doing things that don't work. We need to do things that do work. So psychology of the farmer is the number one most important thing, because if they want to make it work, they'll make it work. Go ahead, Abby. So, and then the next thing is the soil. How are the farm soils? Do they take soil tests? Do they know the fertility and the pH? Are they willing and able to add nitrogen at planting? That's huge. Once you get past, if they want to make it work, you're gonna have to add nitrogen in many cases at planting. And how compacted are your fields? So things about the soil and the field. Internal drainage. Is it a wet field, dry field? And so we need to be thinking about these properties when we talk to the farmer. So no-till, I will just interject this here. It's way simpler as far as planting goes, because you just put the piece of equipment out and go, but it's a much higher level of management, and the amount of work you have to do before you actually get in the field requires more involvement than in a conventional system. And we'll talk about some of those things as we go through. But so anyways, we have to consider the soil and those properties. Go ahead, Adam. So, and then there's agronomic. And this slide is kind of dated a little bit. It's been around for a couple of years, but there's things about the seed that you buy that will help determine how good your no-till system works. And one of the factors is it an early vigor variety? Does it come out of the ground fast and strong? And different varieties of corn have different vigor. And farmers should consider that if they're starting out in no-till. Would you be willing to shorten your relative maturity of the plant you're growing? Now, Heather's been talking about shortening the days in corn for 20 years, and people still don't do it. But it's very important that the soil, I'm not so concerned about the end of the year as I am. We really need to wait until the soils are warm to plant. Planting no-till into a cold, wet soil is a recipe for disaster. So the soil has to be warm and it has to be dry. So you have to understand that about the system. So planting a little shorter day corn, you could wait a few more days to get in the field, and everything will go better. So anyways, and then you can also get a cold germ rating on your hybrids. They don't publish it, but they can be had. So that tells you how well that seed germinates at lower temperatures. Just considerations. And then obviously weed control. Go ahead, Abby. So then you get into the planter. This is what everyone talks about, is the planter. And we do have to do due diligence and make some considerations there. Is it in good working order? Does it have the right attachments? Does it manage residue, especially if you're using cover crops? And does the planter close your trench in your soils? Do you have adequate down pressure? What's your fertilizer, drag change? So there's a slew of considerations when you get to the corn planter. But I want to hold off on conclusions about that. But so there's just things about the mechanical side of it that we need to think about. And they are important. If you can't close the trench, I've been out in fields many, many times where when the farmer planted it, the trench closed. The closing wheels on the back of the planter, which we'll show you in a few minutes, actually did bury the corn. But when the soil dried out because it was wet, the trench opens back up. The soils shrink. They didn't get crumbled. They just got pushed. And when they dried out, the trench opened up, the seed was exposed to the air, and they had very poor emergence and germination. Go ahead, Abby. So, and then there's the whole financial end of the system, which, you know, how much money can you invest in the system? You know, are there cost share programs to offset some of this? For that farm, are there benefits to implementing no-till versus conventional? And the farmer needs to have a list of priorities about where they're going to put their money in the system. And it may not be the corn planter. It could be internal drainage. It could be lime to address pH issues. It could be fertilizer. Whatever it is, they need to think about those things. And as service providers, we need to be aware of that when we're trying to promote these practices, that there may be a substantial investment in getting it off the ground in a good and strong way. So go ahead. And then there's the cultural. This is as important as anything. And that is, you know, the neighbors are all watching them and they get concerned. They may have a failure and, you know, people watch their neighbors and people listen to what people say. And so I just think that people need to have access to answers if they're gonna evoke on this or embark on this adventure. They need to have people to talk to overcome the issues as they arise. We get a lot of calls about the ground's super hard, the planter won't go in. What do I do? And the first thing I ask them is, do you have a coulter on the front? Yep. I say, take it off. And they're like, no, I do no-till. I need the coulter. I'm like, no, you don't. Just get the coulter off. Your planter go in the ground. And so and they have to trust you with what you tell them. So they got to have answers, and it's got to be timely. And then the problems that they face, they just need access to a place to get the solutions to those problems. So go ahead, Abby. So then you put the system back together, and it's messy. It's a lot of considerations, everything stacked on top of each other to get the best outcome. But I've recently been thinking a lot about resiliency and what it means to be resilient. And I think what it means to be resilient is to be able to face a lot of challenges and still be successful. And I've come to the conclusion that being resilient is messy. If you have a cornfield that has no weeds in it, it's just brown dirt, and I call it dirt at that point, but brown dirt and corn, that field is very susceptible to heat stress, moisture stress, erosion, insect damage, a bunch of things, but it looks super neat. If you go in and you do an interseeded cover crop in that field, or you plant green, or you go in and you roller crimp, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, then the field looks messy, but it's resilient. The soil's armored. You're suppressing some weeds. You're cooling the soil, the soil surface, and it's just, this looks messy, but it's resilient. And we've done this on a lot of farms, and where you consider these things, it works. Go ahead, Abby. So, and why I left the corn planter, didn't go way into it. This is out of a trade journal from years ago, but if you look at the factors affecting the yield on a corn plant, I mean, number one is weather, number two is nitrogen, which we'll talk about. Number three is hybrid. Number four is rotation. Number five is plant population. Well, look where tillage is, number 6, right next to growth regulators, whatever those are. Who even knows what they are? So tillage is not the driving factor in a crop system. You have to acknowledge all the things in the system, and then tillage matters much less. And the scales on the bottom is just like the farmer has to balance all this out with weather considerations, and also with, at the time I made the slide, water quality regulations were a huge deal. And they still are a huge deal, but it's not in the news every day like it was 6-7 years ago. So but anyway, I just wanted to show this to encourage people that no-till should be an option, because if in the big picture, it's not that important to the system, as long as you consider the system. Go ahead, Abby. So that's kind of an introduction to the no-till system, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thanks, Jeff. That was great. Not seeing any questions in the chat right now, but I guess I was wondering if you could maybe speak to what a conventional tillage system does look like too. I don't know if that comes up later, but I think maybe some folks might have that question too.
So historically, so that's a great question, Lauren, because it does lead to something that we do need to talk about that may not be in the presentation, is that historically farmers had limited access to herbicides. So, you know, in the 50s, they cultivated, and then they started coming out with atrazine and whatever the early ones were that were really nasty, but they were there. And so people started using herbicides, which meant that they could just till their fields once a year. They had to till in the old days, I think, for weed control. Like, that was a huge deal. You couldn't really, it was very different. And now, if you fast forward to, you know, 2023, 2024, the technology has moved so far ahead that the no-till system is within the grasp of really anybody who wants to do it, because we have we have access to GMO seed. Not that you need to use it, but you can get stack seed that has above and below ground protection against some of the things that may affect a no-till system more than a conventional system. We have access to many, many more herbicides that are really the ability to use a post-emergent herbicide such as glyphosate, as much as we all hate it. It is a tool in the toolbox, and what it does is it allows you to clean up the weeds after planting in a no-till system. So it's not, I mean, I don't recommend using it exclusively. It's a bad recommendation, but it's a tool in the toolbox that could be utilized to rescue a field that you could, so that you may spray it pre-emerge like you normally do, but in a no-till system, you're not burying the weed seed. It's just there. So you may have to go out 6 weeks after planting and touch the field up. Well, there's certain herbicides that work well for that. And so we have access to more tools to be able to do that. So I think that the no-till system today compared to what the no-till system would have looked like 40 years ago is very different because of technology. Plus the planters and planting equipment's come a long ways. We can tell now how much down pressure is on every row unit all the time in the field. So when the ground starts getting hard and the planter starts floating out of the ground, you know it. And in the old days, you didn't know it. So it's kind of like you have much more control over the variability in today's system. And in a conventional system, they're still farming like they did 50 years ago. They just hammer the ground, plant the seed, and the planter doesn't really do anything but drop seed. So that's the planter today does a lot more in a no-till system than a planter does in a conventional system. So I'll say that.
Perfect. And kind of on that line of thinking too, I remember when I first started working and hearing the terms no-till, I was a little confused, and I don't know if anybody else is here, this was totally me, about when, like, tillage refers to both how you're planting something, but then also how you're preparing the bed. And I think sometimes it's confusing when a farmer goes in and they spread their manure and then they disc it in, but then they use a no-till planter or something like that. So you can speak to that.
Yeah, so that is it is confusing for people because they go, well, that's not no-till. Well, it depends on it depends on how much of a purist you are, I guess. We have to do something with that cow manure, and our options are inject it if you can, which is probably the best. Apply it on the ground and leave it. I prefer in the spring, not in the fall, when it's all going to just wash off into the water regardless. Manure on the surface, soil surface, is a bad idea. So we should try to stay away from it when we can. Mostly, I think, because it's at risk of moving off the soil surface, but it's also we lose a lot of nitrogen, and nitrogen's expensive. So the third option is scratch till, we call it. That's kind of a Jeff Carter coined phrase, but to lightly disc the manure in so that you get it buried. You're not doing deep tillage. You're not doing super aggressive tillage, but you're just trying to bury that manure enough to hold those nutrients in the plant zone, so the plant can take them up later. So I think it's a compromise that we've had to make, where there's a lot of manure in the system and you don't have access to injection.
Thanks, Jeff. We've got a couple questions in the chat. Sarah asks, concerning herbicides, are more generally used in a no-till system when compared to a traditional system?
No, I don't. I think there's the potential to have to use more, but I think in general, if you can time the application, the timing of the application properly, I think that it's the same as a conventional system. If you miss the timing and you get a explosion of weeds, then may have to do a second pass. But the same thing happens in a conventional system. Many fields in Vermont get resprayed, and that's mainly due to the weather. So if you don't get any rain to activate the ingredients, they degrade in the environment and they're less effective. So it's not like anyone's done anything wrong, but everything kind of has to work to make those chemicals work right. And so I wouldn't say all the time that you would be using more chemicals. I think you would also use different chemicals. I think it's everything is got considerations. So
Thanks. And then a question from Kent. To provide a reasonable level of success, what is a typical timeline for preparing to switch a field to no-till?
I think the best time in Vermont to move from say a conventional system to a no-till system is when you're rotating the field out of hay back into corn. You just no-till into the hay stubble. Take your hay off, plant your corn, and then when it turns green, again, the tools that we have today are very different than the tools we used to have, but you have the ability to use herbicide to terminate the grass, and then the corn most likely will be fine. And that's the best way for a starter no-tiller to gain confidence.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jeff. That was the last of the questions for this round. For whoever wants to keep us moving on.
Abby.
I will just add to the last question too, some considerations if you are transitioning would be, if a field already has really poor soil health and you're trying to go to a conventional till to a no-till system, you might hit more roadblocks, or it is going to be more complex than if you were to, take incremental shifts towards reducing tillage so that you are building up the soil biology and creating more resiliency in the system that way. Another point about transitioning, and we'll probably touch on this in the next section as well, but really taking that if your soils are really low pH or low fertility or anything like that, and you are going to do one more incorporation or tillage pass, like using that to really set yourself up for success if you do need to amend the soil and you have one more tillage pass where you're incorporating that, and kind of going from there would just be other considerations.
Yeah, and I would tag on to that and say that I may have not been clear, but you still have to consider all the things that we're talking about. Even I'm just saying that the easiest field to go to no-till is a field that's coming out of sod. You still have to, does it have proper internal drainage? Does it have proper fertility? Does it have everything else still has to be right? It's just the day that you go to do no-till, it'll be a little bit easier to do that coming out of sod than it will be a long-term continuous conventionally tilled cornfield. That's you still have to think of it as a system, not as a practice. Always a system, never a practice.
Thanks, Jeff.
May I comment?
Yeah.
Please do.
I really appreciate that answer, Jeff, because we're at the point now where these tillage systems have been around long enough that people, if they're not using them now, there must be a reason. There must be something in their mind why they won't use it. And now you've given us a perfect example about how to start with somebody. Where do you start? Where do you let them develop the confidence in the system? So I really appreciate that answer.
Thanks, Kent. So our next section, we're going to be diving deeper and talking about, real world applications of reduced and no-till systems. And to get us started, I'm going to be talking a bit about reducing tillage and vegetable cropping systems. I will say both Jeff and myself primarily work in field crops, but we're grateful that Becky Madden, who's the UVM Vegetable Nutrient Management Specialist, provided some insights from her work. Unfortunately, she's at the Veg and Berry Conference today, so she couldn't be here herself, but she's been doing some really great work with farmers throughout the state on, developing and implementing and evaluating these systems that are moving towards reduced tillage. And, some of the inherent challenges in the vegetable cropping system that she works with, a lot of them are organic operations. So, really figuring out and managing weed control in those systems is definitely a challenge, as well as, scalability. A lot of the inputs or a lot of the materials are coming off farm. So managing expenses or labor are all important factors. But I'm going to share a little bit of information today, but if anyone is interested in learning more, I definitely encourage everyone to reach out to Becky, and her contact information will be on the next few slides. But some of the strategies can be grouped into three overarching categories. So one is mulching, and then tarping and solarizing, and then finding, opportunities to reduce tillage within your current system, even if it's just small shifts in intensity or frequency, just to start to move the needle. So diving deeper into mulching, on the left, we're looking at a photo of straw mulching. So straw can be a really effective tool to control weeds. One of the challenges with straw is it can be more expensive. Some farms have some challenge with accessing materials. So, really beneficial for weed control, but perhaps some challenges on the economics or the accessibility. On the right, we're looking at a cut and carry system. So in this sort of system, the farm, was growing cover crops and then would harvest their cover crop to then move that and use that as mulch elsewhere on the farm. So, in addition to being, effective in weed control, this is also a great source of organic material, nutrients that will be returned to the soil. As you can tell by the photo and the amount of folks involved, it can be more labor intensive. So that might be one of the considerations if working with a producer that might limit them if they don't have the labor to make this work. So the next example is using a deep compost. So here in this photo, there's a deep compost in the bed. This is typically 4 to 6 inches, I believe, and then wood chips are between the beds and the walkways. There's a few considerations with this system, right? You're applying compost at a very heavy rate. So this is great if the system is in need of nutrients, considering systems perhaps where it's a new farm and they're taking over some like really degraded land that just hadn't had amendments and the nutrients returned to the system that the system quite needed. So this could be a good jumping off point to really start to return that organic matter and the nutrients to the soil. But as you can imagine, this would be more costly. And you'd also want to keep an eye on this long term as you might have nutrient buildup, particularly considering phosphorus from, continued use of a deep compost. And also just there can be some challenges in acquiring, good, clean compost of a reliable quality. So just other things to think about with that practice there. And then on the right is a crimped cover crop system. So they grew the cover crop and then crimped it and cut into it for their planting. Here, since you can't follow if it's organic and you can't follow behind with an herbicide application, you really need to ensure that you have the biomass necessary to provide, as much mulching and weed or protection from weeds as you would need, and really make that assessment in the spring when deciding, whether or not that's going to be a viable strategy for your crop. And the other point here too is just really, honing in on the timing of crimping that cover crop for effective termination, so that you have an effective weed control strategy. So strategy number 2 is tarping or solarizing. So this, there are a few photos here demonstrating similar things, but, this is really effective for killing weeds or aiding in the position of a cover crop prior to planting. So this is also a strategy being utilized throughout the state. And then the last strategy, which really is a combination of many strategies, but, figuring out within a given system where those windows are, those opportunities to reduce tillage. So here in these photos on the left, we're looking at living wheel tracks and walkways, and on the right is a permanent bed system. So, these are both strategies to maybe get living roots in the ground, but also reducing, any need to disturb the walkways. And in a permanent bed system too, by really, by having the controlled traffic where all of the machinery and whatnot is in those walkways, you're hopefully minimizing or consolidating compaction just to those walkways and minimizing the need for any, subsoiling or deep tillage to remedy compaction that would otherwise be in the beds. And, finding opportunities to reduce tillage might also look like, reducing the amount of tillage passes, tilling the soil, more shallow in the soil profile, so decreasing the depth of those operations, and exploring, potential new equipment that might make these opportunities more viable. So the photo here is of a zone tiller, which I know Becky's still working on to figure out, what width of the zone till really balances preparing the seed bed and the soil, where you're going to be planting, with minimizing bare soil and thus potential for weeds and competition. There's also no-till planters, no-till drills, and other sorts of equipment circulating throughout the state to help, bring some of these practices to farms throughout the state. So I think that's it for those slides on the vegetable systems. Again, encourage folks to reach out to Becky if they want to chat more about them. But I'll hand it over to Jeff now.
Okay, so we're going to talk about some strategies for reducing tillage and crop systems here. This is just a picture of a no-till field on the left. That a farmer in Fairfax did. It came out really, really well. It was good. It was good soil. And then the picture on the right is a roller crimp project we did down in Addison County a few years ago. And that was like, it was like winter rye planted at 100 pounds to the acre. And it was, I think, early July. It'd been a really wet spring, summer. And there was no other way that corn would have been planted. It was an emergency rescue plant. And the corn actually did really well. And the picture just shows that the rye laid down, it had reached anthesis, so it had flowered, and it was very, very stocky. And the roller crimper laid it down, armored the soil. The corn came up, and they actually had a fairly decent crop where they would have had nothing before. So it's doable. So go ahead, Abby. So again, when we think about the limitations of the equipment, you know, there's a lot more to it than the planter. So we've already kind of looked at this. The best strategy is to focus energy and resources in the other places in the system, which will then allow the planter to perform better. So what I'm trying to say there is that if everything else is good, the planter doesn't have to do as much work. If you think back to that earlier slide where we are cutting a slot, dropping the seed, firming the seed, covering the slot, that's all the planter does. So we need to make that as easy as possible on the planter. So there's a bunch of stuff that you can add to the planter to help with that. Heavy duty disc, different kinds of rock guards and different kinds of down pressure systems and different closing wheel systems. So the focus of this talk isn't really to get into all those details. But just know that, again, the technology's come a long ways, and the corn planter will work better with some things on it, but the system overall works better if you address the deficiencies in the system. So go ahead, Abby. So, and this is why I say that. So you could have a very good planter, and then you can have a very bad crop. And so the picture, the image way to the left shows a downforce graph where yellow and red is bad, green is good. And so what you can see there is that the down pressure system. So if the lower the down pressure, that means they're actually talking about gauge wheel pressure, and the gauge wheel is the thing on the planter that sets the depth of the planter. So the planter, each individual row unit, I'll show you a picture of this in a minute. Each individual row unit, the depth that it sinks into the ground is controlled by the gauge wheels. So typically you want about 125 pounds of pressure on those gauge wheels. And so the lighter that gets, the more the planter tends to ride up out of the ground. So you can see on this picture, the red is kind of on the headlands where the ground would be the hardest. And in general, the field was hard. So the numbers at the bottom, they're hard to see, but they're quite high. I think the highest is like 212 to 402. So we had to set the corn planter we had to apply a lot of down pressure even to get the planter to go in the ground at all. That's what the 400 pounds per square inch is. So anyways, suffice it to say that we can monitor these things, and that's a fancy planter that does all that, but the corn still didn't grow that well because the system wasn't what it should be. The ground was way too hard. We We didn't address surface compaction. And this is on a field that gets manure injected in the spring. And so with a tank. And so there's a lot of rutting and a lot of compaction. So, and that's what the other two pictures show as well. It's just like issues in the field associated with a system that's not right. So this picture here, I always try to include for, I don't know, farmers have a thing for spending money on equipment. So they'll go out and buy a new 12-row corn planter that could cost a couple $100,000 easy nowadays. And then you can retrofit a planter for a few $1,000s. But a farmer that has outstanding no-till corn, probably quite a bit above county average. This is his corn planter. It's super simple. This is basically an $8,000, $9,000 planter. There's nothing special about it. It's got some key components. So if you look at the picture on the left, it's got two big tanks on it. That's where the fertilizer would go. And he actually stopped using these tanks 2 years ago. One broke off and he just quit using them because he injects his manure in the spring and he waits till his soil's warm. He's got plenty of nutrients in the soil, so he doesn't even use any starter now. But that's unique to his farm and his system, which he understands, so he can do that. I don't necessarily recommend it for everybody, but the picture on the left, the yellow wheels with the black rubber on the outside, those are the gauge wheels that we were talking about. And inside of those, you can kind of see a silver, on the closest one, you can see a silver disc that looks like it may have some dirt on it just above the gauge wheel. That's the V opener. That's what cuts the slot. And then the seed drops down out of the yellow box in between the two V openers. And then the white little tail sticking out between the gauge wheels is called a seed firmer. So that's a Keaton seed firmer. That's what packs the seed in the bottom of the trench to get good soil to seed contact. And then the next thing towards the back of the planter is that funny looking spoke wheel. And that's a Thompson wheel made by a certain company, but that's a closing wheel. That's what is designed to pull the soil back over the trench. And then further back from that even is the little silver tubes with the blue hose going to it. That's where the fertilizer gets dribbled out. The nitrogen gets dribbled out on each side of the row. And then the last thing are those funny looking chains that really work well to put marks on your shins when you're walking around them. But they also, they kind of smooth the soil out over the trench to kind of smooth everything out, make it look nice. That's basically that's what a corn planter is. There is in the front, it's hard to see, but there is also a row cleaner there. You can just barely see it in the right image way to the front, just over the drive tire. But so that's basically what a corn planter is. This is a very simple corn planter, and it grows excellent corn on some pretty tough field conditions. It's a very stony farm up in Franklin, and but he does a lot of other things right. So that's why the corn planter is less important. So go ahead, Abby. Okay, so we're going to talk just a minute about nitrogen requirements. So when we started no-tilling here at UVM in earnest, and back in 2013, I guess, so 10 years ago, we had quite a few failures, to be frank about it. And we were trying to implement conventional planting techniques into a no-till system. They are different systems. Like the conventional mindset doesn't work in a no-till system. So what I mean by that is we use pop-up fertilizer, which is a very low nutrient content fertilizer that goes below the seed in the trench. And really what it is, it's just a couple pounds of phosphorus to try to help the seedling get out of the ground early in the growing season. That's all pop-up's for. Doesn't do anything else. But when you try to account for the lack of nitrogen in a no-till system, you can see in this graph the soil nitrate levels at top dress in a conventional system are much, much higher than in a no-till system. And we have to account for that in the system. If you don't, the corn will come up, especially if you're using cover crops, because the cover crops, even if you terminate them, when you terminate them, they're going to tie up nutrients in the soil as the microbes need to eat something, so they have the energy to go eat the fibrous cover crop and break that down. So early in the season, it definitely ties up nitrogen. Once we figured out that adding 30 to 50 units of nitrogen at planting, that straightened all this out. So you wouldn't necessarily do that in a conventional system, because in a conventional system, like as Abby showed earlier, when you till, you're going to flare off a bunch of carbon. And when you do that, all the microbes go nuts. When they get exposed to air, you stir the soil up. And one of the things that they produce is nitrogen. So that nitrogen's in the soil in a tillage system. Well, it's not there in a no-till system. So the reason we wanted to include this slide is that you have to account for the difference in nitrogen. It's very important. So that's what this slide shows. Go ahead, Adam. And then another consideration in Vermont anyway is, how do we handle the manure? This is an old UVM injector. That's our first manure injector. And we had a lot of fun with that in the old days. Those systems have progressed from this picture, which was probably taken 6 or 7 years ago. The principles are all the same, but how we handle manure in Vermont is we surface apply, we scratch till, we inject, we fully incorporate, we fall apply manure, we spring apply manure. We're working on something now. It's not going to be part of this year's stuff, but they're actually now able to apply manure in season in the cornfields. They've got machinery to do that. So it's just amazing what they're doing with nutrients. But I see the day where robots will be applying manure in Vermont fields while the crop is growing and can utilize them. But that's a few years out in Vermont. But manure is a huge consideration. Obviously, manure in the fall is the worst case scenario, because it's such a long period of time between when it's applied and when it's utilized by the plant. Cover crops help mitigate this because they can sequester a bunch of those nutrients, and we have research to provide evidence of that. But spring applied manure is the best. But it's also very, very challenging on heavy clay soils, which we have a lot of in the Champlain Valley. So it's just a matter of getting people to try things and doing things different. Compaction is always an issue with manure, just because the weight of the equipment you use, it's especially if it's wet, you're compacting those soils, and compacted soils are compromised soils. There's very difficult to get out. Frost action may help some in the winters when we get frost, but the last 2 years we really haven't had frost, and we still don't have frost this year. And we're pretty well into winter. So at least in St. Albans, it might be 2 inches deep, but it's not like 4 feet deep like it was when we were kids. So we have to address compaction in the manure system, which there's a variety of things when we'll talk about in a minute. Go ahead, Abby. So another thing which goes hand in hand is cover cropping. And then in order to cover crop, we're not going to get into cover crops today. That's a whole thing. It may be addressed in the series, but it's a whole nother system. But terminating cover crops is if you're going to grow cover crops, the first thing you have to consider is how you're going to get rid of them, because you're going to have to get rid of them. And so you can do winter kill cover crops. You can do prior to planting, you terminate them. You can plant green with a no-till system. You could roller crimp in a no-till system. Things that are affected by having a cover crop on the field, and in particular, when you kill it, is soil moisture, soil fertility, and if you're using herbicides, which you will be most likely working with people using herbicides, just understanding the how and whens of that. So go ahead, Abby. So planting green, it's kind of where we started. Which is you're looking at a field of winter rye, and we just head out, put row cleaners on the front of the planter to move the residue and plant your corn. This is it works. I know people that do it every year. They like it. Soil types, you kind of want to be lighter soils are better, I guess. But again, you have to have the system working in order to do this. You can't do this on wet fields. And it is true that cover crops we have research to show that cover crops will dry your field out faster than a non-cover crop field, because the plants wick the moisture up out of the ground. But that's only to a point. Once the plants mature, they shade the ground, and if it gets wet, it will stay wet. It will not dry out. And that's where internal drainage becomes important. So I guess planting green, the planter's important, but the field conditions are very important, and you have to, in a conventional system, which means non-organic system in this context, you have to use herbicides either the day that you're going to plant or the day after or the day before. Very close to planting, you want to spray that. And you want to add additional fertilizer like we've been talking about to offset the tie-up that cover crop's going to do when early season. Those nutrients are released back into the soil later in the season, but we have to get the corn up out of the ground quickly, and you're going to need to add nitrogen to do that. Go ahead, Abby. So the next method, which we've done a lot with, is called roller crimping. And so the picture on the left is some roller crimp corn that we did, I think in Addison County again, really, really heavy rye crop. So in order to get roller crimping, this is kind of counterintuitive. So if you have a farmer you're working with and they go, wow, I kind of like to try roller crimping, and it doesn't have to be corn. It could be some other vegetable crop or other crops, soybeans, whatever. They'll go, wow, I don't really want a heavy cover crop. Well, if you're going to roller crimp, you want a heavy cover crop, like 100 pounds, 110 pounds you want a really thick mat or really thick stand of cover crop. And then you have to wait until it's mature. So those are two things that farmers don't like doing. They don't like a thick cover crop because they've dealt with it in a conventional system and it almost ruined them because they didn't understand the system, and they don't like waiting. Planting windows are hard to come by, but you have to wait till that cover crop is mature to get it to lay down and stay down. So this cover crop did stay down. You can see it's snapped over pretty good. The image on the right is actually a Dawn cover crop unit. And so you have the little guards on the front, the little black triangle, and then you have the little residue slicers. And then in the back of that, there's like a section of roller crimper. And so that thing spins on the ground and just flattens and crimps the rye. And then the residue slicers in the front line up with the row units in the back. So it does work quite well. There's a lot of learning to go to get to used to using one, because the roller crimper part is actually pushing down on the ground a little bit, and it totally changes the geometry of the planter, because now you're using those roller crimpers and it's picking up on the planter a little bit, and it changes how the planter plants. And there's actually quite a few adjustments that have to be made to offset that. Again, it's a system. It's not, you got to consider all the things when you're doing stuff, or you get unintended consequences. Go ahead. Okay, here's a neat slide. Again, Addison County, down by Abby. We did some roller crimping, and we left the image on the right. We did it in 2 fields, but the image on the left showed we left strips. We didn't spray because we wanted to know if you could grow corn, roller crimp, and not spray. So that's not sprayed. The image on the right is mid-season, probably August. If you look really hard in the back up by the trees, you can see a couple people's heads sticking up out of that corn. To the left and to the right, the corn was sprayed, but right in those middle 6 rows or so, no herbicide was applied. And you can see, and if you look down on the ground in the very front of the picture, you can see that there's a lot of weeds in there. And so the weeds busted through the mat, and it was a heavy mat. So our conclusion from that is that you still are going to need to use herbicides to maintain yields, even though you're roller crimping. So that, I think, is the take home there. It does, if you don't address the weeds, you will sacrifice yields, and there's more work to be done on that, but in general, that I think that statement holds up. So here's just an example of, if we're talking about planting crops and the need for patience and preparation, in particular with no-till. This is from the early years. This is like a long time ago, before we understood things the way we do now. But I just wanted to show that in the image on the left, it doesn't matter whether you're conventional till or no-till. If your fields are bad, corn doesn't grow. I mean, it doesn't. So here's a wet hole that part of it was no-till and part of it was conventional. It didn't matter. The corn didn't grow either way. So it's not the planter, it's the system. And then in the picture on the right, this was a field up in Fairfield, and I learned this the hard way. I planted that mess, and it was wet. The farmer wanted it planted, and I said, man, the field seems a little wet. It looked dry because this was all grass. They had mowed it. It all turned green again. And it was probably, 6-8 inches high when I got there. And this is a wet year, very wet year. This is probably pushing the end of June, which is, we're getting outside the planting window, and people are starting to get desperate because they got to get their corn in the ground. And I kneeled down to work on the planter, and my pant legs got wet. And the tires looked dry, but my pant legs were wet. My knees were wet. I planted it, and this is what we got. The only place the corn grew in that field is where the tile lines ran. That's it. Nothing out, not a stalk of corn anywhere else. And that, I learned a lot from that. And what I learned is you don't do no-till corn when your pant legs get wet. And that's held true. I won't If I kneel down and my knees get wet, I won't put the planter in the ground. Because I don't want this to happen. So that's the lesson there, is we weren't patient, and it was not profitable. So and then talking about patience, we've talked about this quite a bit. But the soil conditions have to be right. It can't be cold. So no-till soils do warm up significantly slower than tilled soils, and they can't be wet because the trench won't close, really, is what it is about. And so we need to consider soil conditions, fertility again, and then the equipment needs to be functioning as it was designed and implemented. It's not so you're not just dropping seed in a no-till system. In a conventional system, you're just dropping seed and scuffing it over, super easy. In a no-till system, it's not. The planter's got to be set up correctly, and especially in bad conditions. So this picture here is a picture of a trench that opened back up. You can see the little corn sprouts growing in the middle, but you can see that trench it was closed. But what happened as the soil dried back out, you could see that the side walls didn't crumble. They just kind of got pushed, and when it dried, the soil shrank and it just opened up. And there'll be a serious yield hit in that spot. The corn will not grow as well. Even if it all grows, it'll never. I'm sure it came out of the ground way later than the other corn, and the yields will be way off. So again, it's the system. It's not the planter. Not to say that the planter doesn't have to be set up right. It does, but what I'm saying is you can use a simple planter that is set up right and get the same results as a fancy planter set up right if the rest of the system is correct. Go ahead. And this is another picture of our no-till planter. I've kind of already talked about these things, so I'm not going to get into it too much, but this is a white planter that UVM has that we've probably rebuilt this planter 3 times since I've been here at UVM. So it's got all the bells and whistles on it. And it does a really nice job. We also have a 12-row planter that we use up for on-farm demos and such, because we just have so many people that want to utilize it. It's a lot faster to go with 12 rows than it is to go with 6 rows. So we use them both. But this is one of UVM's no-till planters, and all the planters basically come the same. They all have the same components: closing wheels, disc openers, and such. Go ahead. You can go ahead. And then another thing at UVM that we do a lot of is we do a lot of drilling, no-till drilling into hay meadows, pastures, cover cropping, even into tilled ground. We run the no-till equipment. So the drill on the right is a sunflower drill that's been here longer than I have. And for simplicity and just steady results, it's the best drill on the market. For maintenance point of view, sunflower, they got that right. And it's a very easy drill for people to use. And that's a 10-footer. The next one over is a John Deere drill. I forget the number of that, if it's a 1360 or something along those lines, 1560. And that uses a different system, but does the same thing. A little bigger, 15-foot drill. And a lot of people use that to drill wheat and soybeans, no-till over in the islands. And the third drill is our newest drill, which is an S drill, which is the coolest drill we have, because it turns sideways and you can pull it down the road without scaring people off into the ditch. And it's got 5.5-inch disc spacing. So if you're going to do a forage seeding, the seeds are much more evenly distributed across the field. So, And it also uses a different metering system. It actually uses sponges to grab the seed instead of a cup. It's kind of cool. So it gives you more, it's more adaptable to different size seeds being together. It's really made for cover cropping more so than some, or seed blends anyway. So that's our drill lineup. And then we also do no-till interseeding, which is another no-till practice. We have three of these. Two of them are pictured. We have a interseeder technology seeder that's so this is to go between the corn rows while the corn is growing and interseeding cover crops. So say you aren't going to get your crops off till late. This technology allows you to go in. Really, they say to do it at V6, but we've done it from V2, which is when the corn's first out of the ground, up to V12 until the interseeder can't go through the corn. And it has mixed results, and we've tried it a lot, and it boils down to, I think, herbicides. If you're using herbicides that have residual, which means, I guess in simple terms, that staying power, it's going to keep the weeds dead for a while, then interseeding's not going to work. And we're in a little bit of a tough position in Vermont where the farmers rely heavily on their custom operators that do their spraying for them. So the flexibility about what we use for spray is a little bit compromised, I will say. So it's a great idea. We'll keep working at it, but it has had its struggles here in Vermont. And then we have a couple more pieces. The monstrosity of a piece of equipment on the left is Kelly Diamond Harrow, which we actually recently auctioned off. But it would be an example of a scratch till implement where it works the ground very lightly. And for us, we bought it for a grant to try to use to work cover crops in lately in the spring in clay, and the really heavy enough to do that. And like a year after we bought that, they came out with a different disc that would have worked so much better, but the price of it was like, to retool that machine would have been like, I don't know, $30,000 or something. So we didn't pursue it. We actually ended up auctioning that off to somebody in Ohio, I guess. I helped them put it on a trailer, and it was a couple inches over. It's 13 feet 5 inches. Side note, the guy hit a bridge with it, but he didn't wreck it. It didn't hurt anything, but he told me he did hit a bridge. So better him than me. But the next piece is on the right is our conservation. I know this may sound foreign to you, but it's our conservation subsoiler. And why I say conservation is that you can see the depth at the tool works where the rust line is. It's about 18 inches deep. And you could run that tool and then you could no-till right in back of it. It doesn't disturb the soil surface at all. Like 2%, 4% of the soil will be disturbed. But what happens when this tool runs through the ground, it's kind of hard to see, but it's got wings on the bottom in the back. And those wings, I know it's hard to fathom, but they're 30 inches apart, but they heave that whole soil profile up about 6 inches and then sets it back down. So it alleviates that compaction. So you're supposed to run those, I think, 2 inches below the compaction layer. And we have had people go out with pentometers and measure the depth of the compaction and then set the gauge wheels to just go 2 inches below it. And it's, to me, it's a necessary evil. We sometimes in a no-till system, you reach the point where you have to do something about the compaction. And if your cover crops don't grow well, or if you're not using cover crops, you're gonna have to subsoil. And what that does is it just increases the ability for the roots and the water and the nutrients to move through the profile better. And so this is a piece of equipment that we have that gets used fairly often. And the farmers really like using it. It does help. A lot of people don't do their whole fields. They just do the ends where they drive all the time. And it works for that too. So go ahead, Abby. So basically, we're starting to wrap up now, and so there are challenges in a no-till system. We've kind of been hitting on those throughout the afternoon here, but so from a agronomic environmental point of view, the left-hand column lists some of the challenges that a no-till system will face, and then on the right, we have some of the strategies that we can use to address that. So we have macropores and preferential flow. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. That's where we're losing nutrients down the soil profile, and they're getting into tile lines and moving off the field through the tile lines. We get P stratification with no-till. If you're not stirring the soil up, and in particular, if you're not using cover crops, and I just saw a study. I was out in Indianapolis, and a fella gave a presentation about this. All the phosphorus is getting tied up in the top 2 inches of soil, and then under that it drops off quite drastically. So we have to address that in the system. As well as dissolved phosphorus losses, which would be out through the tile lines. We get delayed emergence, and I guess I'm not doing a great job about reading the solutions to the problems, but you can read them as well. But delayed emergence has to do with planter setup and also waiting until the conditions are right to plant, and then nitrogen requirement. I've harped on that a lot because I think it's huge in a no-till system, and applying N at planting, using inhibitors, absolutely a viable option. It's a little bit of cheap insurance, if you will, to stabilize that nitrogen. If you're using a form of nitrogen that volatilizes, some forms of nitrogen don't, and in which case you wouldn't need or you may need a different inhibitor depending on how the nitrogen is behaving in the soil. And also considering the dynamics of cover crops, which we have touched on. And then water management is also very important. You got to improve drainage, possibly depending on your field conditions. Building organic matter, every percentage point of organic matter will store 27,000 gallons of water per acre. So while we may frown on that a little bit when it's wet, definitely when it's dry, you can see the fields that have high organic matter, the corn doesn't curl. And that's because the soil's storing so much more water. Folks that pulverize their soil 9 inches deep, their corn curls at the first dry day because there's no moisture in the soil. It doesn't have any aggregate stability. So again, got to be patient when you plant. You don't want it to be wet. We've touched on that, and also be mindful of cover crop termination timing. Folks used to go out and terminate their cover crops 3 weeks before they planted. The plants would all lay down, covering the soil surface. Fields would not dry out. They'd end up having to till them to try to deal with it. So that's why I said earlier, you terminate the cover crops the day of planting or the day after planting, and that alleviates that issue. Finding a way to fit manure into the system. and we talked a bunch about that, and then also compaction and just trying to prevent it, and then if it does happen, dealing with it. I know out west they use controlled travel lanes and tram lines and this and that, but it looks good on paper, but that's all in a grain system, and we're in a corn silage system where everybody drives everywhere on the fields no matter what. So it's just a different world. You can do it some on hay fields a little bit better, but because you have the ability to merge rows together, but really it's an issue that we have to be prepared to deal with. Go ahead, Abby. And then this is our final slide, our final considerations, and so the things that we've been talking about for the last little bit of a while is that it's a system, not a practice. All farmers are on they're in different places on the continuum, and we got to meet producers where they're at, and we have to work for the producers and work towards their goals. And the goal is a resilient system. We've touched on this. We all know what the effects of the changing climate is in our region. Just look outside today. There, at least here, there's no snow, and this weekend my daughter's car got stuck on our lawn, which is not supposed to happen in the end of January. So we need resilient systems, and no-till is a resilient system. I've seen it. It's much more resilient than a conventional system when things go wrong. And I guess I explain it this way when I'm talking to people, that in a very good year, your top yielding field will probably be your conventionally tilled field. But in a very bad year, your lowest yielding field is going to be your conventionally tilled field. And you can maintain higher levels of yield year in, year out in a no-till system. And I've seen it. People that buy in and do it right, not the people that are trying it for some other reason. If they adapt the system, it'll sting you every now and then. One year we had a heavy cover crop, wet spring, and slugs were a problem. So there are things that you have to manage in the system, but overall it's a more resilient system. And then using science and technology is really what's brought this forward at a wider scale. And then and I talked about that some, and then strategic tillage, it's a thing. It's going to be a thing. We gave it a fancy name, but people are already doing it, and people shouldn't be offended by that. It's going to maintain their ability to do a more reduced tillage overall system than conventional tillage. I work with some farms that did do some strategic tillage last spring, but they still had no erosion off their fields, where back when they chisel plowed every year, they had erosion every year. So they didn't do full depth tillage. They did do full swath tillage, but very shallow, and that's okay. I mean, it's where they're at. So, and then, Vermont, who have been tremendous about helping producers move forward. I go to conferences, not as much as I'd like, but Vermont does more to help their dairy farmers in the environmental realm than any other state in the country, except for maybe outside of Delaware or Maryland. Wherever the Chesapeake Bay dumps in, they get a lot of financial help too. But Vermont's second to that. So they'll need to continue to do that, and I can't commend them enough for what they've done. There's way more. You go out west and you talk to people about what's going on here, and their mouths drop open. Like, it just will never happen out there. So, and it's also reflected in the fact that people don't adopt conservation practices too, right? So, so the things that we do need to be scalable. They need to work on the small farm and the large farm. And for the most part, I think we're managing that. And as you continue to learn more about it, you'll see where things fit in and where they don't fit in. Patience is paramount, and everybody needs to work together to effectively support farmers. So that's what we got.
Thank you, Jeff and Abby. Much appreciated. We do have some questions for you before we let you run away. This question's from Tom. When you no-till forage legumes into hay or pasture, do the seedlings survive competition and do they establish long-term?
So I know you're going to love my answer. It depends. So some years, some conditions, they will, and then other years they don't. Sometimes you've got to wait till the next spring to find out. We've had what we thought were poor results, and then you come back in the spring and the clover's all there. Clover's that's a funny species. It looks like nothing, and then all of a sudden it's there. And last summer we did some legume into grass seedings, and the farmer intended to spray them out. And this was a Friday. He was going to spray them on a Monday. We went and looked at the field on Monday, and everything had germinated in 3 days. So he wasn't able to spray the field. And I went back and looked at fourth cut, and I couldn't see anything there. But the jury's out. We're going to wait. We're going to reevaluate the fields in the spring. So I think soil moisture, soil temperatures, air temperature. If you're going to go legume into grass, and you don't want to use herbicides, you've got to try to set that existing grass crop back as far as you can, because it is going to be competition. So we've scalped it with a mower. We have spread manure on when it's dry, have it burn the existing grass crop and set it way back, and then drilled into it and had pretty good catch. That was totally random and by accident, but it worked. And trying to recognize the things that work. So anyways, it depends.
Love the answer.
And
Yeah, go ahead, Abby.
I would just add like pH and soil fertility, like having those so that they're conducive and favoring to legumes over grasses. Yeah, it depends.
So let me follow up on that. When we work with a lot of dairy producers, but you folks may work with a lot of other kinds of farmers that say they buy a property, they've got 30 acres, he works at home, whatever, but they want to do something with their field. They got this field out back that's full of chickweed or whatever, burdock. And we get these calls where they want to do, and that is really where what Abby said comes into play. You've got to look at the stuff. If you don't, it's going to be a failure. So in a dairy system where it's getting manure and all, you got to set the grass back. In a system where it's been fallow or neglected for 15, 20 years, you got to look at a lot more things.
Thanks. The next question's from Tom. How deep is strategic tillage? 5 to 6 inches?
No, less, probably
Less.
2 to 3 inches. Just trying to get the manure under in that situation, or you're trying to get ruts out from a wet year. There's different reasons why you would do strategic tillage, but I would contend that you need to go the minimum distance and depth that you need to do to get the job done that you're trying to accomplish. There's no sense in running a full width tillage tool over it and not getting the results that you need to get. If you're going to do it, just do it and get it over with and then move on. Don't try to go 2 inches deep when you need to go 4, and then you get done, you still got a rutted up field. That didn't help anything. So that's
Yeah, I think it's less a matter of depth and like what what's the goal? You know, like, do you have ruts in the field, or do you have deep subsurface compaction that you're gonna have to subsoil? And it's, yeah, being very specific about what the problem is you're addressing, and then only doing it on those portions of the field that needs addressing. And I know, like, when I'm with farmers and they're thinking about something, like, I ask them like what the end objective is, to make sure we have the right implement, the depth, the conditions, you know, all of those considerations in line for success to actually be strategic.
This is one that isn't in the chat, but I think builds off of this. Vertical tillage. I don't know if you could give a quick summary of what vertical tillage is, because there are still a couple more questions, but
Ugh. We've done a lot. The vertical tillage is vertical tillage. The idea behind it is you're using straight disc. You're moving the soil vertically, not horizontally. The tools that they're selling today are very aggressive, I will say. And the other thing I'll say is, if you've soil sampled behind them, they put compaction in. Horrible. You can't get a soil probe through it. So what the problem, I think if the soil was dry and the conditions were fine, it'd be okay. But a lot of people try to use them to dry the soil out. So they go when it's wet, and it just puts the worst compaction layer in about where your root zone's going to start. And right at that 2 to 3 inch level. And the first thing your little seedling's hitting is whack into a wall. And so that's what vertical tillage is, using straight discs to move soil up and down instead of horizontal. And I guess it has its place. If you're going to do that, just do no-till. Manage the system. That's my opinion on it. And we've done vertical tillage on farms and just had them move to no-till. No advantage.
gotcha. Question from the chat. Any experience with baker boot type openers versus double disc openers for forage legumes into grass?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Comment from Willie. Timing, early spring or late summer, soil moisture, seeder drill calibration, and depth of seed and the interseeding into existing forages have seemed most important in Willie's experience. He does not think, he thinks many do not calibrate and do not check for actual seed placement depth. I don't know if that's been your guys' experience as well.
Yep, I agree with Willie 100%. So calibrating the drill is number one. A lot of people don't do it. We help a lot of people do it. And seed depth is critical. The smaller the seed, the more careful you got to be.
And then he also posted in the chat, Baker boot is the Atchison no-till forage drill style. Works very well when set up correctly and can easily not be set up well. Thanks, Willie. I've got one more question for you guys, and then we'll transition out. We talked a little bit about manure and no-till systems, and we referred a lot to liquid manure. And I didn't know if you wanted a chance to just talk about the liquid versus solid or semi-solid and how those can interact in tillage systems as well.
You mean the good old days? Back before liquid?
Yeah.
I think solid manure and semi-solid manure is a great option as long as you have it and can manage it. I think you're still, I think in a no-till system using manure particularly, and Abby can comment, please do, but I think if you're going to fall apply, you need a cover crop to even though it'll be less prone to leaving the field, you still need to get those nutrients sequestered for the winter, and which means you need to put the manure on early enough, which means you got to get the cover crops on early enough to make all that happen. I'm a huge favor of semi-solid and solid manure just for the environmental stability of that product as opposed to liquid manure. It's much easier to manage from an environmental point of view. Then maybe if you're in that system, you're doing scratch till, so it's not true no-till. But again, if you think about people chisel plowing or moldboard plowing 6 to 11 inches deep, and what that does when you get a hard rainstorm versus 2 to 3 to 4 inches deep, and incorporating manure. I mean, it's got to be tillage with a purpose. You can't just do it to make a seed bed, but if it has a purpose, then that'll work good. And I think that I'm a big favor of solid manure. I know it's harder to manage, but environmentally, way better.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for your time today and for answering all of our questions. Mel is going to toss the survey in the chat for everyone. And in the meantime, just wanted to prep everybody for our next class. This one, the homework's a little different than normal. And so we're actually not reading out of our course textbook, but there are 5 articles posted on campus from Interlace Commons. So please go take a look at those to be prepared for the agroforestry event that we have next week with Megan and Eli of Interlace Commons. Just 2 of them are very focused on soil health, and then the other 3 are just very useful for the conversation to have some of the language that we'll need. I just want to thank everyone for coming today and for sticking with us. We really appreciate how involved everyone is and all the great questions that are coming in. So keep them coming. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. And thank you again to Abby and Jeff for sharing your knowledge. Hugely impactful. I know I had a few aha moments myself, and I'm sure others did as well. So thanks, everyone.